Um, so, yeah, who's in the room right now? We've got Sasha, Tall Travels. We've spoken a couple of times this week. Great to see you, mate. Two lovely people. It's a funny story, actually, with these two lovely people. Are you both online, or is it just you? You know, let me know so as I know if I'm speaking to both of you or just one of you. Maruta Kellers, one of my strongest supporters out in Chicago. So yeah, great to see all of you. Who else we got in here? See, I've got the screen over there. The font's too small. It was a last minute thing, so we'll figure this out. David Pollard, yes, gave me some good news that he'll be arriving in Riga the last week of January, so I'm looking forward to that. Who else is here? Wow, I didn't expect that many people. This is fantastic. Mark my words, the drone flyer from Poland, Gdansk, got a cool channel actually. And one day I'm going to go up to Gdansk and he'll teach me how to fly this drone. And the Toy Man, my Italian friend, also in the US. How's it going, my friend? Hope you're doing well. And David, my boy, he's in there too. James Ditselis. If I'm saying your name wrong, let me know, guys. No disrespect, but the names from all over the place, and Latvian names I get a lot of trouble with, so let me know if I'm saying it wrong. And I'll greet some more of you in just a minute because it's so far away, I keep having to lean forward. But yeah, once again, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting my first live stream. And when I was thinking on how to structure this, you know, I asked a few of you guys if you had any questions, let me know. Kind of help keep the flow going. So if you see, you know, that you want to ask a question, just drop it in the comment. And my assistant, who's monitoring right now the comments, will just let me know what's being said because there's no way I'm going to keep track of all of this. So I thought, you know, we'll cover some of your questions and then talk about some Eastern European adventures. Actually, I'm going to talk to you about the most recent ones I've had. You know, right now, I should be traveling between Bulgaria into Serbia, Albania, and then my plan was to fly to London. But as you see, I'm back in Riga, and I'll tell you the story behind that. But I'm going to have to be very, very delicate on how I share it with you. But now, let's tackle a few questions. So, I've got them here somewhere. So, I was asked by KW. I don't think he's online, but he might watch this later, so we'll tackle it. When are you starting your cooking channel? Now, anybody who watches my channel knows that I'm fascinated with food, both eating it and preparing it, cooking it. You know, I'm the type of person that will get in the kitchen the moment I feel stress or I have a lot on my mind. I will start chopping an onion, and it just kind of like liberates me. It puts me in the moment. And yeah, cooking is something that I absolutely love doing. I can spend 4 hours prepping little things that are going to disappear in 3 minutes. But that is the love of cooking. And I've tried making a few videos in the past, and they worked out well. They got some good response. But let me tell you, cooking on YouTube is not easy, especially when you have one camera. I've got 2 now, but it's still not enough because there are so many angles, shots that you want to, you know, give your viewers that, you know, you're presenting, then you're preparing the vegetables or whatnot, so you need to change the angle. Then you've got something else to say. So you put the camera back in the presenting mode and you've got to fixate it so it's almost perfect. Then you go in and start cooking. So you bring all the stuff into the kitchen, all the equipment, position it right, cook. Then you might go back into the presenting mode. Then you want to taste it at the end. So it's a lot of, you know, messing around, setting up equipment. So cooking is definitely part of the plan. And I'm not sure if it was him, but someone said, I've got a good name for your channel. And it's Justin Eatin Europe, which I thought was quite funny. But yeah, cooking channel is definitely in the plan. The only thing is I need the equipment, and right now the return on investment with YouTube, well, it's seriously negative for me. The channel's grown phenomenally over the last few months. Let's see, what is it now? Since March of last year. I'm really pleased with the results. And I, honestly speaking, I started this as a joke with my daughter, and ultimately it became a hobby, a passion. And then it started earning some money. So I'm like, wow, well, if I could do this full time, then why not? It'd be great. But the reality of any business is that after 2 years, if it doesn't pay for itself, you can't call it a business anymore. It's a hobby. So right now I'm running it as a business. I'm trying to put out as much content out there as possible. And I've given myself actually 3 years to do that, to get it to a point where it would be a self-sufficient business. But failing that, I'll have to scale it down to a hobby eventually if it doesn't take off. But the whole point was never to making it take off, but rather to have something there. How fascinating will it be? I always say this: how fascinating would it be today if I could go online and watch a few videos of how my grandparents were, let's say, years ago. I think that's just something that would just fascinate me. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. The whole plan is really, my kids, my grandkids, great-grandkids, 50 years from now, I'll be able to see what Justin was like back in his 40s. So yeah, it's all interesting. Let me just monitor the questions real quick. Let me see. Sorry guys, I'm really learning this, so you're gonna have to bear with me. Okay, where are we at here? Tell me. Okay, this is a very, very frequently asked question. What do I do for a living? And as a matter of fact, it was formulated nicely the other day. I kind of like this. It made me giggle. So he said, "Hey Justin, talk a little bit about your career and life before becoming a YouTube star." Now, I never considered myself a YouTube star, and I think that's what's really amazing with YouTube is that I think you create a link or a bond with the people you like and watch, because they're really just normal people. They're just like you and me. So that's a very complicated question. In order to answer that, I've got to go back many, many years, because my career started when I was young. So, but I've got to go beyond that, back to school. And that's a place I don't like visiting. I'm not a school person, never have been, never was. And I pretty much, called it a day when I was 15. I understood that school wasn't for me, and I was definitely not for school. I have an allergy to schools. And at the age of 15, so I was born in London, but at the age of 15, I moved to Florida, to the US. And that's where I really started my work life. You couldn't call what I started doing a career. My first job was working in a flea market in an area of Florida, of Miami, called Hialeah. Now, Hialeah is predominantly Cuban, Haitian neighborhood. And the best job I could find at 15 was working in a flea market. And the most horrifying job I had was making French fries all day to sell to, the customers that roamed around the flea market. And that was diabolical. Cooking French fries all day, ending the day cleaning up greasy fryers. But I had a laugh. I really, really had a laugh. It was a great time of my life, apart from the job itself. Working in Hialeah with all the Cubans, I really got into their music and, salsa dancing. And I'll leave the details of this kind of gap for another session. But when I was, I think, a week before I turned 19 years old, I then got into investment banking. I became a stockbroker, a licensed stockbroker in Florida. And my career literally just took off from there. The motive behind that was really, I read a newspaper article, and at the time, I think it was George Soros had broken the Bank of England, made $1 billion in one day, and I'm like, well, what does this guy do? And I found out he was in finances and everything else, so I said, okay, I'll become a stockbroker. And the next morning, I went into a brokerage firm, asked for a job, and fortunately, it was some old lady there, and it was a brokerage firm that was full of retired stockbrokers that already ended their career. They just went in there part-time to trade a few stocks for friends and families. And she says to me, all right, this is not where you're going to work as a stockbroker. She says, as you see, everybody here is older. They've already done with their careers. But you want to find one of the more, mainstream firms. But let me give you some suggestions. At the time, I looked like Bon Jovi. I had long hair and earring. I went in with jeans and cowboy boots. If anybody remember the 1980s, 90s, that's how we dressed. And she said, but what I suggest is get a haircut, buy a suit, maybe get rid of the earrings. It wasn't very popular in those days, especially in the banking business. And, prepare a CV, because I didn't even go there with a CV. I took her advice, and after a lot of sweat, I managed to land a job and became a licensed broker at the age of 19. And at 22, my career then moved back to Europe. At first, I was in Vienna, working with Raiffeisen Bank, where it was Bank Austria initially. Then they merged with another bank. There was a lot of consolidation in the banking industry at the time. Banks were buying one another, and it became Credit Anstalt. Then I moved on to Raiffeisen Bank, which was the biggest commercial bank in all of Central and Eastern Europe and Russia, where my Eastern European career really launched. And I was dealing mainly with trading equities, so stocks in Russia, in the Baltics, Ukraine, pretty much all the former Soviet countries, as well as Eastern Europe. And so I did that for many years. And after that, because that was a very stressful business, nothing you could sustain for too long. By the way, I've got myself a gin tonic here, guys, so cheers to you guys. I don't even know if it's allowed to drink on YouTube, but I was watching Joe Rogan smoking a joint the other day on YouTube. I said, nobody's going to complain about a gin tonic. Oh yeah, it's cucumber water, guys. It's cucumber water. Hang on a sec. So yeah, I got into trading equities in Central Eastern Europe and Russia. And I was traveling a lot on business to Russia, and a lot of people say, well, what about your languages? I know it's a question that's come up, but has come up many, many times. And I'm not going to spill the beans here. I'm not going to tell you how many languages I speak. That is reserved to the channel. You want to find out, you're going to have to tune into the videos and watch. And every time you'll say, wait, he's got Spanish, he's got French, he's got, just keep adding them up. And one day it might be revealed, but by the time you figure it out, I'll probably add a couple more. So, but yeah, so I was in a meeting in Moscow, and at the time, and in those days, used everything via translators. Now, I'm a very passionate person. When I'm trying to make a point or trying to convince someone, everything's about my energy, and trying to do that through a translator is impossible. They destroy you. And the other thing was that I realized that translators weren't always on your side, especially in those days. So I made it a point that learning Russian would be a valuable asset to me. First of all, it's a language that is spoken or understood from Poland all the way to China. I mean, that's a lot of area, that's a lot of people. And so from that point of view, it was a huge asset. I mean, the return on investment for learning a language like Russian would have been huge. But most importantly, it was necessary for my career. Not everybody spoke Russian, but I knew if I could pick up the language, I could fast track my career. So I did that for many years, as I said. And in 2010, just after the world's biggest crisis, I got into another business. I retired from banking a few years before that, and then I decided to get into the food business, where I was importing and distributing food in Spain with all the supermarkets. That's another fascinating story that really was just like, how did that even happen? But yeah, I used to import a lot of foods, and we started with one supermarket chain, and before we knew it, we had most of the supermarket chains all over Europe and all the coastal regions where you could find Russian holiday makers or, Russian people and Ukrainians and, Polish or whatnot. We were supplying foods to the supermarkets. And a few years ago, I got out of that business because the logistics side of that business is just a nightmare. I mean, it's 24/7 non-stop. And today, guys, all I left myself with is something I'm really passionate about, and that's caviar, red and black. I made a video about the red caviar, how it's produced and so on, a few months ago. And that was a production I was doing in an area called Rezekne. And so I basically now produce and distribute red caviar and some black in Western Europe, but we produce it mainly here in Eastern Europe. So that gives you an idea of what I do for a living, seeming that, I've been asked so many times, and I never know how to answer that. What are you just going to type all this? It's just too complex, too difficult. Because, when you say what you do, it always kind of opens a can of worms and people ask more questions. Let me stop for a second and find out if there's anything else going on with the person that's monitoring the questions, because that's just too far. I can't read it on my laptop. Go on.
So somebody said they were hoping that you were a secret agent.
Oh, secret agent. First of all, that's a delicate question. I mean, I always wonder, how would you even answer that? If you said you were a secret agent, then you're definitely not. And anybody that is a secret agent would never admit that they are. So, and I get that asked a lot. And most recently, I was asked that many, many, many times. But no, I am not a secret agent, saying that officially here. So anybody of you who think I am, any officials out there thinking that I might be, I am not. Anything?
What has been one of your favorite videos to film so far?
Oh, favorite video to film. I think my favorite video to film was the one where I shared an Uzbek meal with a lady, an older lady, and it was heart-wrenching. It was a heart-wrenching moment for me, literally. I mean, I was just decided to make a video about Uzbek food in the market in Riga. And, when I'm holding the camera, people don't realize that I might have a view on them or whatnot. And I noticed this old lady carrying loads of bags, and she stopped literally at I was putting my food out on the table, going back and forth, and I put my food down, and she was carrying all these bags, and she took a break right at the table where I was eating, and she put her bags down and just stood there, and I'm kind of watching, and I'm seeing her glance at the food, and I'm like, oh no, this can't be right. So I started speaking to her as I speak to most people, and before you know it, we were sharing a lunch together. Now, most of the conversation that actually happened isn't on the video, but we really had about 40-minute, maybe even an hour lunch together, which was condensed for the video. But yeah, she was telling me about her son and her career during the Soviet times, that she worked in industry and so on, and it was just fascinating. But I think that moment really, for me, was many bonuses. First of all, because I hate eating alone. I've always said, you eat alone, you die alone. Food is meant to be shared. Food is meant to be something that it's like an experience that you want to have with other people. So I will always opt to sharing a meal rather than just, eating alone. So number one, I got to do that. Number two, I got to hear some really fascinating stories about, life during an era that fascinates me. And I want to touch a little bit about that, my fascination with the Soviet Union as well, not to confuse it with being pro-Soviet or wishing this was the Soviet Union or, remember, I'm from the banking industry. You can't get any more capitalist than that. I'm really a free market individual, but I'll touch on that just a little bit later. So I got to share a meal. I got to hear some fascinating stories, but I also got, and most importantly to me, I think that this is a generation of people here, especially in this part of the world, that it has just been brushed aside. Like I said, they grew up in a system that they were always taken care of. Maybe not in the best way possible, but their basic needs were always taken care of. So they never had to worry about going out there and, earning a living and, paying their bills and so on. It was a system that just functioned not perfectly. And then one day, a generation of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, this all disappears. And nobody's stopping and saying, well, these aren't young people, they don't have the time to really, build up some savings or build up their finances. They just got thrown in there and said, you know what, as of today, everything you've ever believed, everything you've ever, counted on is gone. And now you fight for yourself. Now that's all right if you're 20, 30, 40 years old, 50, yeah, you still have time. But, this is a generation of people that from one day to the next. And the best summary I once heard about, because I often ask, I said, when did you find it better? In those days, during the Soviet times, or now? And this old lady once told me, she says, you know what? I'll explain it to you very, very simply. During the Soviet times, we had two types of sour cream. Now, anybody knows that in the Soviet Union, sour cream was an important food. It's put in every soup. Students used to eat it for lunch by the spoon. I mean, sour cream was a staple thing. She said we had two types of sour cream, but I always had one of them in my refrigerator. She says, now you go to the supermarket and you might have 25 different sour creams, but oftentimes I don't have any of them in my refrigerator. And that kind of really summarized how these people woke up one day and found themselves in this situation. So when I find these people and I can give them this feeling of significance and really take interest in their stories, and I could sense that this lady was just like, she was being revived in a sense. She was really enjoying the moment, except for enjoying the food. She really enjoyed the food. But yeah, so those three things together really made it an amazing, amazing video to film. And apart from the fact that the food was phenomenal. So, yeah. Moving along, I hope that answered your question nicely. What do we got?
Of all the Eastern European countries you have visited, what made you choose Latvia as a base and Riga in particular?
Okay, so what was the first part?
Why did you choose Latvia as a base?
Okay, why did I choose Latvia to live in? Okay, well, that kind of happened by default. Like I said, since 2010, I've been importing foods from the whole region, and the Baltics was always a great place to buy foods from because they always catered and produced foods that were similar to those produced in Russia and everything else, but they were already in the European Union, so importing them was easy. The quality is tip-top. And whenever I would go on business to the Baltics, I would always go, let's say, to either Lithuania or Estonia first, and end all my business in Latvia and then spend the weekend, because it's such a great city that I've just loved Latvia for a long, long, long time. And as a city itself, it's just brilliant. You've got everything you want, you've got everything you need, but it's really condensed. You don't need a car here, which for me is phenomenal. I'm not doing the traffic anymore. There's just no way I'm ever going to live in a place where that happens. So, I could go downstairs from my apartment and I have 4 supermarkets within a 2-minute walk. There are hotels everywhere. There are bars, there are cafes, there are clubs. If you know the karaoke place that I went to in the video, that's about a 6-minute walk from mine. So I'm really central. Everything is just perfect with Riga per se. Another thing that's very, very important to me is that wherever I choose to live, I need to have a good quality airport. What I mean by that is not the way it looks, but rather the connections. There are daily flights to London. There are daily flights to Brussels. There are, and then you've got Air Baltic that pretty much connects everywhere. So it's a reliable place to fly to many destinations without having to, spend 3 or 4 hours at an airport somewhere waiting to connect. That's one of the problems, let's say, with Varna, which is another city that I really love. And I have a lot of, good memories and everything else. But the difference with Varna, even though I couldn't say I like it any less than Riga, for me, the airport that just doesn't function during most of the year properly, and you can get 2 flights to Vienna every week, and it's just like, nah, that's just would not work for me. So, and the reason why I actually moved here is because, as I said, I have production here. During COVID, all the lockdowns, airports shutting down and everything else, I decided, that side of things, back in Spain, France, Italy, wherever I ship the caviar to, that's the easy part. The things that can sometimes go wrong, is more on this side. So I figured it'd be beneficial to stay here. And then I really liked it that much, actually living in Riga, that I decided that's it, I'm staying. How long? Nobody knows. But for now, this is home, and I absolutely am loving my time here. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Did you ever visit Liepāja yet?
Liepāja. That is a place that I definitely want to make a video about. Yes, I've been to Liepāja. I've been to Karosta. I have been to the North Fort, which is an absolutely fascinating place. The last Russian imperial port to be built that just collapsed into the ocean. The bunkers. I mean, anybody who knows me, who knows that I love history so much, knows that Liepāja would be one of the first places I would go to. But unfortunately, I haven't been there as a YouTuber. I've been there just for my own personal pleasure. But it's definitely somewhere that I would love to go and film and make films about, because of the history there. As a matter of fact, I had an idea recently, because I don't know how many Latvians are watching right now, but I had an interview recently on TV3 here in Latvia. I think it was last week on Tuesday. It aired on a morning show called 900 Seconds, and they called me up and said, we watch your channel, we follow you. It's kind of interesting. Do you mind if we meet up with you and ask you a few questions? And I said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I was on the show, and it dawned upon me that, there's nobody really covering all of Latvia. I want to make it a point now to really cover all the major cities of Latvia and have them all under my belt, because it's such a phenomenal country. There are so many abandoned buildings that I love that you start today, you could end in 5 years, and you still haven't covered them all. You've got some fantastic manors, these muizhas all over the place. History is so rich here because of the last, I would say, 800 years of history just in Riga, I think. And all the influences between the Scandinavians, the Russians, the Germans, it makes it such a rich place to just travel around and really enjoy the country. Fabulous, guys. Whoever's not been to Latvia before, make it a point, put it in your bucket list. This is definitely a place worth visiting. Next.
What are your plans for another 5 years? Are you planning to finally stay in some country for longer? Maybe you're coming back to London?
Next 5 years, what are my plans? I'm hoping that this project, this YouTube project, really takes off. I'm not counting on it, but I'm doing, I think, everything that I can to make it happen. I had a goal this year. I'm a very goal-centered person, so a 5-year question is a very good one for me. But I had a plan at the beginning of this year to put out 52 videos, so basically one a week. And up until 3 weeks ago, today, I was right on track. And then something occurred during my trip that I haven't posted in 3 weeks, and that's why I decided to do a live stream, kind of like a bonus to you guys. And if you guys enjoy this, let me know if it's something you'd like to see more of. Definitely, I'd be more than happy to do them with you. But and now I'm behind 3 videos, and there aren't many weeks in this year left. So I really have to step up my game to make sure that I end the year on a high. So that's just for this year when it comes to YouTube. 5 years from now, yeah, I could see myself at, possibly having a couple of 100,000 subscribers, and maybe supplementing my income through this. At least not having it cost me money, because right now you can imagine flying somewhere, taking a hotel, eating the foods and everything else is just an expense that can't be justified over the long term. Where I'll be living, I always say to people, I actually live at the airport. When people say, well, where's home? Home to me is really when I walk into an airport terminal and there's that echoey sound and the townoid and all these noises coming through. That to me is when I say, I've arrived, I'm home. All the hustle and bustle and looking for your flight and everything else, that's where I really feel in my element. And that's why really, and I think I'll talk about this in another live stream. It really is the reason why I designed, back when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, that is really why I decided to design my life in a way where this would happen, and I would get to experience all this travel, because it's always been the case. I mean, I've literally lived all my life in a suitcase. So. But no, I don't see myself living back in the UK. I do see myself traveling more and more and more, either as a YouTuber or not, but traveling will definitely be part of it.
What's your favorite cuisine?
Oh, good question. What's my favorite cuisine? That's not a fair question, because there are so many good ones. And, it really, let's see, can I really pick one? I mean, for me, it's with the mood. Sometimes I really fancy a fiery, meal that's just going to make you sweat and cry, so I'm off to the Indian. And sometimes I really just enjoy, a very simple meal, like Latvian carbonade with potatoes. And I don't know if I've said this before, but the Latvian potatoes are just to die for. They just don't taste like potato. If you've grown up eating potatoes anywhere outside of Latvia, then you don't know what a potato tastes like. I mean, this is ridiculous. I would never eat boiled potatoes. Boiled potatoes was just not food to me. It was just like, hot, piping hot little balls of tasteless mush. But ever since I've come to Latvia, I can actually eat boiled potatoes and the flavor comes through. So with me, it really depends on my mood. But if I had to say one type of food, I think would probably be Middle Eastern, because that's where I can really get the versatility. They have a lot of sandwich foods, they have a lot of spicy foods, and they also have a lot of simpler foods. But yeah, I think Middle Eastern would be on the top. But once again, it would be very close to many others. So Uzbek food is great, Georgian food is amazing, Armenian barbecue where they make lula kebab and lula potatoes and everything else is, it just wouldn't be fair to say one is the best. But if I was cornered and had to come up with one, then I would say Middle Eastern, because I find it more of a fusion of different areas. So yeah. Anything else?
What camera are you filming with?
Okay, what camera am I filming with? I get that asked a lot. As a matter of fact, I recently was asked by another YouTuber, and they're very hard to find, so I managed to find him. Well, I had a spare one, and I sold it to him. I use the Sony FDR X3000 It's actually, I think I can show it to you in just a second. So it's basically a little camera. It's not very big. No, I won't be able to show it to you. I'm all mic'd up. I'm all connected up. So I'm not. But anyway, it's the Sony FDR X3000. And the reason why I chose that camera is because it has a very wide angle. It has a stabilizer inside that is not digital. So at the time, my options was that, or let's say a GoPro, which has digital stabilization. But with the Sony FDR, the optic on the inside is actually floating. So when you have the stabilization, it's not a digital image that is being cropped in and, you know, frozen. It's actually a floating lens within the camera that causes the stabilization, and it's, in my opinion, second to none. And another important thing is that with that camera, the audio quality is so good that I don't need to have, you know, one of those mics on the top that, you know, people walk around thinking, what, you know, what's that thing on this guy's carrying? It's not too intimidating. You can hide it. So it's the perfect vlogging camera, but they stopped making it, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. So now, if you find new ones, grab them, and if, you know, you're lucky to find second-hand ones. I mean, just to put it this way, I have 3 of them just in case, because not having a camera would put me, you know, out of YouTube. So I have 3 of them, 1 that I use and 2 backups, because I know that eventually I won't be able to get that camera. And it films in 4K, although I film in 1080, simply because I tried once doing it in 4K and I thought my computer was going to take off. It was making such a sound that it sounded like a 747 taking off. So I stick to 1080p. Great gin tonic, by the way, guys. Any other questions?
Are you interested in dart or snooker? As a British guy, you should.
Am I interested in?
Dart or snooker?
Yeah, I used to play darts a lot. I even had a dartboard at home, you know, 501. And snooker, I absolutely love. Ronnie O'Sullivan, the best ever. But I remember it back from the day when, you know, Steve Davis was the main player. You know, now he commentates, but I remember the days when, you know, everybody was drinking beer and smoking fags. You know, when they played snooker, and he was very like proper, drank his water. He was so unusual. And then there was Stephen Hendrick, and there's so many great snooker players over the years that, yeah. And yeah, I play snooker as well. I mean, I don't have a 147 break or anything, but I like to play some snooker, although I haven't played in years. But yeah, who asked that question? Just curious. Sorry, guys, I'm not reading these myself because I need binoculars. For the next one, I'll set it up so as, you know, I can do it a bit better. Because I'm actually using my phone to record this, but I'm connecting it to the computer, so the quality... What's his name?
Michael shows up.
Okay, Michael. Yeah, so if you ever come to Riga or we cross paths, then let's have a game of snooker. Why not? There's a good place here where you can play. So, any other questions?
Yeah. Jolie or Robbie, Fincher or Tarantino, Taiko or Piraki, train or car, village or capital, Spice Girls or Jackson, eating sausage with a homeless person or drinking with a cute girl.
Oh, let's see. Eating sausage with a homeless person or drinking with a cute girl?
Yeah.
Come on. Of course, drinking with a cute girl. I can eat a sausage any day of the week with a homeless person. That's, you know.
Train or car?
Huh?
Train or car?
Train or car? I'll take the old-fashioned slow train where you can really enjoy the scenery and you've got that, you know, that sound that just doesn't exist anymore in many parts of the world. They've changed all the, you know, the tracks and they just go shh. But that old-fashioned train, you know, definitely. Yeah.
There's Village or Capital, Spice Girls or Jackson, Type Radio Purity.
Michael Jackson, not the Spice Girls, and karaoke over anything, I think. I love singing. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's some more. Do you plan to live in Riga forever?
Oh, do I plan to live in Riga forever? I plan on having it as one of my bases, just like now I spend a lot of time between Spain and here. So I plan on definitely having it as one of my bases, but I don't know if I can endure those bitterly cold winters for many more years. I think I would like to do, the spring, summer in Riga is phenomenal, and then maybe go south for the colder months, and keep that sunny smile on my face all year round. Huh?
What is it like in the east of Latvia, near the Russian border?
I did a video in Rezekne, which is right near to the Russian border. And what I can tell you is that it's very, very, very Russian looking. As a matter of fact, there's a film that is played every New Year in Russia and in many countries where they air Russian TV. That's called Slochim Parim, and it's basically it translates as a light steam, which is what you say to a person after a sauna. So if you go to a sauna with someone, or you've just come out of a sauna, people will say that to you. And it's about this guy I think New Year's, they get drunk. Anyways, make a short story boring. The guy ends up looking for an address, but he's in the wrong city. He thought he was in Moscow. He was actually in St. Petersburg. He found the address, same building, same entrance, same everything. And that's kind of how I felt when I was in Rezekne, that it, you could have been in any of these countries. You could have been in Belarus, in Ukraine, in Russia. So it's very much like it. And it's very close to the Russian border. As a matter of fact, when I was there last time, I actually drove to a point where the Russian, Latvian, and Belarus borders all meet up. So there's a triangulation there where you could actually be, run in circles and just keep running around three countries. But unfortunately, I drove for about an hour, and I got to some really bad dirt roads, and then the border patrol stopped me and questioned me for about half an hour what I was doing there. And this was just when the war in Russia and Ukraine had just begun. And, everything was like high alert. And they basically told me to get lost. I wasn't going there today. So, but yeah, it's very close.
I noticed you went to Moldova. How come you didn't upload any videos?
All right, so the Moldova question, as I said when I started this, right now, as we speak, I should have been traveling to, right now I would have been in Serbia, next stop Albania, and then off to London. So the plan was this: I flew to Moldova, I was going to spend 3 days in Moldova, then 3 days in Pridnestrovia, which is Transnistria, then go back to Moldova for a few days, travel down Romania, along the coast, into Bulgaria, cross over to Sofia, Plovdiv, make my way into Serbia, and then, continue over to Albania, and then from there fly back. But honestly, it all went to shit for me. First of all, a week before my trip, I had a subscriber here from Spain, and we went out for a couple of drinks and everything else. And I don't know if you guys seen these scooters that dash around town. So I decided we were going from one club to another. He'd gone already. I was joining him. I took one of these scooters. Anyways, I flew off the scooter, literally twisted my foot backwards. Now, I heard the crunch when it happened, but I said, it'll be all right. Got back on the scooter, went to the club, and then a couple of hours later went home, took my shoes and socks off, and thing was swollen. And that kind of like made things difficult. So for about 3 days, I had to. Well, I couldn't step on it. Let's put it this way. Went, had it X-rayed. They couldn't see anything because it was just way too swollen. They said, definitely some ligament issues there, but you need to come back when the swelling's gone to do it again. I haven't been back yet. So that happened just before my trip. I was even considering canceling it, but then I said, no, I'm going. So I spent 3 days in Moldova. I have a big memory card, 256 gigabytes, which fits a lot of footage. I spent 3 days there. Then I went over to Pridnestrovia, Transnistria, spent my time there filming. And I was in a Soviet restaurant, because Transnistria is really a fascinating place. It's really surreal. Actually, I wanted to share with you some change, some money that, I'll show you what the money, the change looks like. The coins, yeah, what they look like over there. And they're literally made out of plastic, literally plastic coins. So I went there initially for 3 days, liked it so much, decided I was going to stay a couple of days more. Here, take a look, guys. This is money from Pridnestrovia. I don't know if you can see that, but that's basically plastic money. And this is the back of it, or this is the front of it, actually. And visible? And that's the back. So yeah, that's their change. So I decided to extend my trip there. I met some people from Israel while I was there, and they'd come over because a grave, an Israeli rabbi grave, or not an Israeli, but an old rabbi grave was found in northern Transnistria, right on the border with Ukraine. And they decided to go and visit this grave. So they said, do you want to come for the ride? I said, yeah, why not? So I went for a ride with them, and all good. Now I'm going to have to tread very carefully now as to how I share this story with you, because I don't want to say anything that might backfire on me later. But to make a short story boring, whilst I was out there in that part, right on the border of Ukraine, that was the day after 2 missiles were fired from Russia over Transnistria, which Moldova calls their territory, into Ukraine, and the whole place went onto high alert. Now you have to understand that this is a place where their passports still look like Soviet passports. Their money, I showed you, is made out of plastic. Their economy is still a paper economy, meaning you go on a bus, you buy a ticket, and they'll give you a little stub, that big, a little paper stub. So it's really going back in time, and I kid you not. And it's really surreal. For instance, I went to the market there. Now, I always go to the markets. You guys know that. And I went to the market and usually when you go into a market, you've got some, people working there, and the babushkas, the older ladies, are usually very, aggressive and, like, what do you want? Don't waste my time. There, they were all smiles. They were all happy. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what are these people on? What is going on here? So I had a fascinating time there. Really collected some fantastic footage. But whilst I was in that part near Ukraine, something happened, let's put it this way, and all my footage got deleted, which really destroyed me. So I have now given the chip, the memory card, to some computer whiz kid that apparently there is a way of retrieving deleted files, and I'm hoping that'll be the case. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask, what happened, and so on and so forth. All I will say is, look, right now it's a very, very tense time to be going to a place like that, especially if you have a British passport, and walking around with a camera is not advised. So figure it out for yourselves, but I'm not going to say anything else about this, but I'm hoping to be able to retrieve some of this footage to put some films together. Hence, another reason why I've gone 3 weeks without posting is because everything I planned on posting just went out. So anyways, I'll tell you the full story one day if you come to Riga or we bump in a place and we're sitting in a bar, and I'll share the story with you. Be more than happy to. But yeah, any other questions?
When are you going to learn Latvian?
When am I going to learn Latvian? Let's see. See, the thing with learning languages is that there's no such thing as a bad language. There's no such thing as a language that's not useful. But there has to be some leverage. Now, let's face it, when you live in Riga and you can speak English, you can communicate with all the younger crowd. Anybody that's 30 years old or younger, you can communicate with them. And they seem to love communicating in English. And then when you can speak Russian, anybody that's over 30 years old, you can communicate with them, no problem. So, so there needs to be that motivation or that reason. I'm sure if I was in some, Brazilian jail, I had no choice. After 3 months, I'd be speaking Portuguese. But it's so easy here to communicate in English and in Russian. But having said that, I am learning Latvian now. So I have a way of learning languages that is very passive. But my vocabulary, I can understand quite a lot of Latvian. Runāju arī, but I just don't classify it as a language that I speak yet. It's a language that's like many of them. So there are languages that I speak. Now, when I consider a language I speak is when I can win an argument in the language and understand a local joke in the language. That's when I classify, yes, tick, you speak the language. Now, there are many languages that I can communicate in that I'm not at that level yet, so I don't classify them as speaking. But don't worry, Latvian's getting there. It's happening in my mind. I do understand a lot of things, and I do listen to a lot of Latvian music. One of my favorite bands here, is Brainstorm. Fantastic musicians. So yeah, and right now I'm using that as something to familiarize myself with the language. So don't worry, Latvians, you're not forgotten. I know it would be cool to say, I speak a language that's spoken by just a couple of million people on the planet. That would just be like so unique, wouldn't it? It would be like top secret code language. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Go on.
Have you toured Slovakia?
Oh, Slovakia. Yeah, I've been from Bratislava up to Nové Zámky. I think I'm saying that correct. I think the first time I was in Bratislava was one of my favorite experiences. I was taking a train from Bratislava to Prague. I think that was in 1996, 7, 8. I'm sure it's, I'm not sure. I know things were very different at the time in the whole region, but that was right away one of my favorite cities, actually, especially Bratislava. Not Slovakia, because we're not talking about just, but Bratislava was one of my favorite cities, and that Raiffeisen had a huge presence in Slovakia, so I used to go there quite a bit. Yeah.
What's your favorite vodka brand?
Oh, my favorite vodka brand is Березовая Rosha. Basically, it's a one that I've only ever seen here in Latvia. It's apparently from Belarus. It's a very cheap vodka, because all these expensive ones I don't necessarily go for. Belarusian vodkas or Belarus vodkas are renowned to be top quality. And just like with anything else, when you want to make something of quality, you have to start with good ingredients. So if you want to make a good meal, you need to start with a good... And the same thing here, when you're making good vodka, you need to start with good water and a good process. And I find that Belarus vodkas... And how do you really judge a good vodka? It's not necessarily because you take a shot and say, yumbo, that was delicious. That's not what vodka's about. But it's really... It's the day after is when you know you've had some good vodka or not. So, yeah.
Do you believe a serious conflict will happen in Europe? What's the current mood in where you live?
Oh, now we're getting political. Now, that's something that I try and avoid, especially online, because, as we know, I don't know if you've watched Boulder Bankrupt recently. He's gotten in a bit of trouble for expressing his views. A lot of people are getting cancelled for saying the wrong thing. I'm a big fan of freedom, free speech. Say what you like, so long as it's legal. And what I mean by that is freedom of speech doesn't mean that you can run into a movie theater and, that's completely dark and scream fire. Yes, you're speaking and you're free to do it, but the consequences would be disastrous, and that I find terrible. But being able to express your mind, express your feelings, express the way you feel about things is very important, and we're not living in a place where it's easy to do that right now, especially for a person like me who's using, who's at the mercy, let's say, of platforms that are very strict about this. But I want to say one thing, though. Repeat the question to me again, because I just want to make sure I get...
Do you believe a serious conflict will happen in Europe? What's the current mood where you live?
So I'm hoping that there won't be serious conflicts in Europe, but I'm seeing a lot of parallels between what we're experiencing now and the 1930s. I wasn't around in the 1930s, but the last century, the history of the last century, especially the Second World War and the Cold War, are things that fascinate me. I read a lot about them. I've tried to educate myself a lot on that, and I try and get a lot of perspectives. And I think we're in very, very touchy grounds right now. As for where I live right now, I think it's died down a bit. I think right at the beginning of the war, there was some really intense situations. But fortunately, I think they've calmed down a little bit, and I'm hoping that, as I said, all these countries are very complex because, like it or not, for better or for worse, every country that was once part of the former Soviet Union is going to have a huge minority of population that were born in their home country, regardless of how you view it, in their point of view, right? They were born in the Soviet Union and they woke up one day without a country, stateless, homeless. And it's a very complex thing. So, any issues right now between Russia and other countries is so, it's very hot. It's very hot. So I try and avoid speaking about this because, you just never know, especially in Latvia, you never know where a person stands, what's their view, and you never want to offend anybody. My job is not to offend anyone. I try to, if someone wants to have a political view or a religious view or any crazy view they want, well, by all means, I'm not here to tell anybody how to live or what to do or how not to do. I believe in freedoms. I'm a firm believer of freedoms, but yeah, I avoid these topics a lot because you never know, even if you sometimes think you're speaking to a Latvian, but the mum might be Latvian, the dad might be Russian, and vice versa. And sometimes you know that it's just very, very complex. And my advice would be, don't talk about it. So yeah.
Have you traveled any of the Scandinavian countries?
Yeah, I've been to most. Well, I've been to Finland many times. I've been to Sweden. I've been to Denmark. I've been to Norway. Does that cover all of them? Pretty much. Yeah, so I mean, I know Finland is not classified as Scandinavia, but I was just kind of going across the top there. So, yeah, and absolutely loved Sweden. Sweden was a fun place, and Finland. The first time I went to Finland, I remember this was funny because I was flying. I think I was flying from Helsinki to Moscow on an Airflot flight with some colleagues of mine, and you know, we were at the front of the plane at the time, and I remember I saw the air hostess. Now remember, this is the 90s, it's a different. The air hostess had a tray with what looked like a bunch of shots, and she opened the door to the cockpit. Now this is before 9/11. This is when the cockpit just opened, you know, as any door. You didn't have to put codes and hide and everything else. So she opens and she comes in with these tray of shots, and I look at this, you know, the colleague I was with, he was Georgian at the time. I said, man, I think these pilots are having shots before they take off. He goes, don't worry, they'll fly better that way. You know? So it was an experience. So yeah, that's the one thing I remember about leaving Finland is what happened then.
What's the top 3 most interesting countries you ever visited?
Oh, interesting countries. Top 3. You know, there's a lot of countries that I like visiting. And I find that you can find something interesting anywhere you go. I don't care if you're, you know, in suburbia in England or you're in this magnificent city of Riga. There's always either you're a person that can't find interest easily, or. But I think if you look and if you try and meet the people, it can always get fascinating. But I would say Morocco is up there. Morocco was a fascinating place. Riga, I find it fascinating. Latvia as a whole, mainly because of the history. As you know, last century's history really fascinates me, and it's very rich with that. And I would say Ukraine. My first experience in Ukraine when I first went there, I think it was in 1997, the first time I went. Oh, I can't remember exactly what year it was. Maybe a little bit later than that. But and I mean, in those days, Russia too. I mean, Russia. I think you got to understand that was a time when, for me, everything was new. I mean, they even used. I had a nickname there, you know, Белая ворона, the white crow, because I used to stand out like a million miles away. And it was just so different to what I was used to, from the cars to the architecture to, you know, the way that people interacted with each other and with you for being a foreigner. You know, I mean, I could tell you stories of things that occurred in Russia. So it's hard to make a top 3. Morocco definitely one of them, because I absolutely love the place. And then it would either be Russia, Ukraine, or and Riga is definitely up there. It's one of my favorite places in the world, actually. And a lot of people say, well, why? You know, it's fascinating. If you can walk around the streets of Riga and not look at eye level, but just tilt your eyes up, it's absolutely breathtaking. You know, and it's gotten better over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, it used to be like if you walked at eye level, it was like, oh, what is this? But the minute you walk and look at the buildings further up, I dare you to just walk down one street and not stop several times to say, wow, look at that. It's just really breathtaking.
Will you be in Latvia in December? I will visit and hope to meet.
I will be here in December. I have possibly a planned trip to Belarus before the end of the year. I'm going to travel to Vienna, Barcelona, London, and Belarus. Those are the planned trips I have, although I don't make videos of, Vienna, Barcelona, places like that, because I've made them and people say, well, it's not Eastern Europe, we didn't sign up for this. So I'm like, yeah, fair enough. Although I really got in because I niched down on Eastern Europe, but obviously my long-term view is to travel to many places and share more content in. But I think right now it's fair to say that people that sign up for a specific niche channel, it's fair to deliver that. So, but I should be here in December, especially the second half of December. When am I back? From the 17th, I'm back. So it depends when in December, but I think I'm back on the 17th from Malaga or from London. I can't remember which one I'm going to, but yeah.
Will you ever film in Spain since you speak fluent Spanish? It would be great to see, plus amazing food there.
Claro que sí! I will film in Spain. Like I just said, I mean, if you guys want, I can make, and I did do some footage the last time I was in Spain, but I found that the videos that are not really Central Eastern Europe or Russia and so on, they don't do as well. But for me, I find them fascinating. I mean, yeah, to share with you, the amazing paella or pulpo a la gallega or gambas pil pil. There's so many great things and amazing people and just different life completely. I spent many years in Spain. As a matter of fact, all my kids were born in Spain, and really fascinating country as well. Big fan, big fan.
Who inspired you to do YouTube? Was it by watching Bold and Bankrupt?
As a matter of fact, no. I mean, I actually discovered Bold and Bankrupt after. It was my daughter who... Oh, so someone just asked, sorry, I'm assuming you guys... I'm getting the question here and I'm just answering it, but someone asked what were my inspirations to do YouTube. Was it Bold and Bankrupt? And the truth is that no, I discovered Bold and Bankrupt after. Early on in I think it was... the inspiration was my daughter, actually. She had a YouTube channel and I was walking around. I can't remember what city we were in, but I started speaking to people as I do. And one moment I'm speaking in Arabic, the next minute I'm speaking in French. Then we skip to Spanish. And she's like, Dad, that's madness. You know what? If you bought a camera and just filmed yourself, just don't do anything different. Just the way you speak to people and how you flip between languages and everything else. People would love it on YouTube. I'm like, YouTube? I didn't know much about YouTube. To me, YouTube was, a place where, people, or my son watches people playing video games and my daughter's, makeup tutorials or things like that. I really didn't know much about YouTube before I got in. As a matter of fact, if you believe me that before I got on YouTube, you couldn't hardly find a picture of me online. And then obviously when I decided to do it, I started looking and I found Bold and Bankrupt, and I did make a video commenting on something that he ate once and so on, but that was like early in my career. But yeah, my inspiration was my daughter, who really, it's not like I was watching YouTube and saying, oh, I'd like to do this one day. It was just like, she saw me, she said, you should try it. I gave it a shot and really enjoyed it. So yeah. Let's see, it's now 8:10. I mean, this can go on for forever as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I didn't set a start time or an end time, but I'm happy to go on a little bit longer if you guys are not too bored or don't have anything else to do. What is anyone comment?
Just what's your favorite beer in Eastern Europe?
My favorite beer in Eastern Europe. Now, before everybody from Latvia jumps up and says, hey, we're not Eastern Europe. I understand that, but could you imagine if my channel name was just in Central Eastern Europe and Russia? It would just be a mouthful. Once upon a time, the dividing line was really, you had two sides, the East and the West. And I'm not saying it to offend anybody or to be like You know, I have nothing against Eastern Europeans or Western Europeans or Central Europeans, or if you're from Timbuktu or you're from, you know, it doesn't really matter to me. So I don't look at it as being a bad thing. But when I say Eastern Europe, it's just like that dividing line that once upon a time we had the countries of the East and the countries of the West. So, but I absolutely love a beer here called Valmera Moija, which is a manor house from Valmera, which is a city. And I've been twice to the brewery to try and make a video about it. And one day I went there on a Monday, they were shut. And the next time I went there, and they've got like a beer garden, but it was pissing down with rain. And the problem I have with my camera is if a droplet of water gets on the lens, then it blurs things out. I once did a video where half of it was blurred because a droplet of gin tonic got on the lens. So, but yeah, I think a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up.
When are you coming back to Bulgaria?
Okay, so as I said, I was supposed to be in Bulgaria now. Someone asked, when am I coming back to Bulgaria? I think January, for sure, I will be back in Bulgaria. The second half of my trip that I was supposed to be on right now, I'm going to postpone to January and, continue there.
Are you wearing the Bali bracelet?
This?
Yes.
Am I wearing a what?
Diwali bracelet.
Yeah, Diwali. No, I've had this for years. But I was invited to a Diwali party last week, or was it earlier this week? I can't remember. But yeah, I did a video about partying with some Indians a few videos ago. And we found this Indian restaurant. We ended up eating great food there, and they had a Diwali kind of like event. So we enjoyed that very much, and yeah.
Football or cricket?
Football, but I decided a long time ago, anybody who doesn't watch me, I don't watch them. So I'm not tied to anything that requires me to, be a certain place or a certain time. Although I did grow up with cricket. My granddad was a massive cricket fan. He wanted his ashes scattered on Lords, and he used to play. He had hands like banana bunches. He used to play silly points. So yeah, cricket's also a great sport, but I think, yeah. But
what do you think of new British PM?
New British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, or as Biden said the other day, Rashid Sunak. I found that completely ridiculous that he wanted to congratulate Rashid Sunak, the new Prime Minister. Listen, I think any Prime Minister right now has an impossible task. They're walking into a bloodbath. 3 Prime Ministers in 1 year. I believe that it takes a certain type of individual to even want that job in the first place. And if it was up to me, I would say I would set some criteria as to what must happen or what qualifies you to be a politician. And, I would set some certain criteria. For instance, the biggest salary you could have is minimum salary plus 50%. And that would almost guarantee seeing minimum salaries go up. I would make it, I would prohibit, let's say, the ownership of equity stocks for me or for the politician and all their close relatives. And you see all the people just fly out of there, and suddenly maybe it would attract some people that had some really good motives and good ambitions. Because right now, the way I see it, wherever I look, it's just disastrous everywhere. So, but anyway, guys, thank you for supporting this live stream. We've been going on for 1 hour and 15 minutes now. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Write me some comments saying, yes, we'd like to do this again. If you found it, then let me know as well. See what I can do to improve or make it better or whatnot. But But yeah, thanks a lot for your support, not just today, for the channel in general, and enjoy your journey.